recorded. We also want to make sure that we have good mute awareness on your technology. So if you are in a situation where you're not speaking at the moment, then we encourage you to mute your microphone so that you're not talking over other people that are trying to talk. And because this is a larger group, we do have quite a few people, so any extra noise will tend to contribute to a lack of understanding. So we encourage you just right at the bat to get familiar with your mute button, where that is on your screen, and be able to mute yourself. And then as needed, if possible, through the meeting, there might be an opportunity to speak up. We'll discuss that a little more. One of our primary considerations tonight is that we want to have questions for the speakers. We again have a decent sized group here, so we may not have the capacity to handle all of the questions tonight. But if you are so inclined, you can enter a question into the chat. So again, that'll be another feature on your screen that you can get familiar with by entering a question as it comes up as speakers are presenting. You can enter that question in there. We will try to get to at least a couple questions toward the end of each speaker's time. So obviously the time constraints, we may not get to all of them tonight, but we would like to have our forward those questions to the speakers and perhaps get a response even after the meeting. So if your question doesn't get asked tonight, just be aware that we will have a possible opportunity to address those in the future. And so in the chat, I'll be watching and trying to catch questions as they come through. I'll have to be a little bit selective. And then Diane is also going to be assisting as kind of a backup in case I miss some. I wanted to thank our sponsors for this evening's event right off the bat. Our event is hosted by the Multi-Faith Network for Climate Justice. A lot of you probably knew that by the time you had registered and logged in tonight. We're supported by the Center for Spiritual Living, Sustainable Connections, Community Energy Challenge, Peak Sustainability Group, Still Point at Beckside, 350.org Bellingham, Climate Reality Project Bellingham, Sierra Club Washington State Chapter Mount Baker Group, North Cascades Audubon Society, and the Multi-Faith Network is an affiliate of Earth Ministry. So we have quite a representative gathering here tonight, and I believe that you are going to be glad that you are here tonight and for what you are able to receive and participate in. Again, we have quite a few special people that are going to be presenting tonight. Right at the start, unless I missed anything housekeeping wise, I wanted to introduce Stephanie Silencion from the City of Bellingham. She is here on behalf of the city, and she is part of the Public Works Natural Resources and specifically works in the environmental education and outreach area as a specialist. So Stephanie, I think you might have a few words to start for us this evening.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks everyone so much for joining us tonight and to the Multi-Faith Network for Climate Justice and all the sponsors and the speakers who are putting on this great event. I'm really excited for it. As Brian mentioned, this event is part of the City of Bellingham's third annual All-In for Climate Action Week. And this is a week that is full of community events that highlight all of the knowledge and resources that our community has to offer when looking at solutions to climate change. And we still have some great events that are happening through this weekend as part of Climate Action Week. We have a volunteer work party to restore habitat at Squalicum Creek Park. We have an electrical vehicle car show, a trail dedication and group hike at Baker Lake Trail. We also have some film showings left, a fun treasure hunt activity for kids, Bellingham Vegan Restaurant Week, and more. So I'm going to put a link in the chat that you can follow to find a list of all of the events that we have. And I hope that you can check some of those out. Thank you all again, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, that's very helpful information. And Appreciate that you will put that into the chat so that those want to access it are able. So we want to also start this evening with by introducing Reverend Verta for a land acknowledgement and some reflections. Reverend Bobby Verta is the minister at the United Church of Christ and is a certified spiritual director, a certified advanced labyrinth facilitator, and a retreat leader. And Bobby has recently retired from parish ministry at United Church of Ferndale after serving 3 different congregations in Whatcom County over the last 32 years. Bobby is a wife, mother, and grandmother who believes it is our collective responsibility to work for the most vulnerable, and she believes that the worldwide climate changes are making us all vulnerable. Her happy places are walking, hiking, biking in the beauty of nature, as well as reading and creating art with her 3 grandsons. So Bobby, it seems like a good intersection of some of those tonight to have you here with us and introducing the rest of the evening for us. So Reverend Bobby Verta, would you please provide the land acknowledgement and opening reflection for us?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. I'm going to start with my reflections and then end with the land acknowledgement because it makes more sense right now. Thank you all for being here this evening for this important forum, and it is a joy that we can meet through technology instead of exposing one another once again to the the worldwide pandemic. I wanted to share with you all that my husband's family lives in Finland, and we recently returned from a 5-week visit with the family and many friends there. They, like us here in the Pacific Northwest, have experienced a record-breaking heat wave over this summer, and that was followed by torrential rainstorms. And we have at least one friend who is a crop farmer, and we know through his own experience and then listening to the news of other crop farmers that many of the fields were devastated, first from the drought and then from the rains. I wanted to share that with you all because climate change is not just here in Whatcom County. When I flew back to SeaTac Airport on September 15th, I was looking out the plane window, and not only did I see the vast green spaces that were completely brown, but I was shocked at how much snow was missing from Mount Rainier. And I grew up in Enumclaw, right at the base of Mount Rainier, and I've never seen it as bare as I witnessed it this September. The East Coast has suffered from devastating hurricanes. The South has suffered from monsoons, and worldwide, we all know that there are human beings who continue to seek refuge from political, economic, and environmental hazards in their home countries. We also can see and hear, if we listen carefully to our news, that their worldwide creatures are moving closer to human dwellings, seeking also sustainable life. That's why I'm here tonight. There is something that has happened to us in the last year and a half that has brought all human beings together, and that is the reality that we are not invincible. COVID-19 has reminded us that indeed we are connected and we are all vulnerable. Climate change is real. Our planet is crying out for help, and we humans must respond in an urgent and compassionate manner. So again, I want to thank people for coming together tonight. And I invite all of us to listen to the wisdom that will be shared with our wise presenters tonight with open hearts and open minds. Let us be together this evening grounded in hope. Let us urgently commit to taking an action to protect this beautiful planet that we call home. We have the power And we have the responsibility as people of faith to use our voices, our votes, and hold investors accountable, not only for ourselves, but for creation, creation that gives each of us life. And for those who have no voice, and for those who are so young that they don't even understand that their voices need to be heard as well. So I invite us, in the turmoil of everything that is going out or going on in the wider world, I invite us to take a deep breath right now. A deep breath, allowing the fresh air to flow into our lungs, and then gently blow it out. But as you take a deep breath and blow it out, I invite you to imagine. Imagine listening to the sweet song of birds singing, or imagine the rippling of a brook. Imagine taking a hike and enjoying the wild flowers of the meadow field. Imagine eating a delicious meal of fresh produce from a local garden, maybe even your own. Imagine the sound of children innocently playing on a pristine, clean shoreline. These images are what I pray for and invite all of us to pray for the next 7 generations from now, that the people who are here inhabiting this planet that we call Earth will also know these joys that I have just mentioned. This is what we are called to protect. So I ask, O Creator God, to hear our prayer, and in your love to inspire us and to answer your call to caring for planet Earth. Let us humbly acknowledge that we gather today on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascade watersheds from time immemorial. Let us also acknowledge the harms that the collective Church has placed upon our Indigenous sisters and brothers and the land itself in the name of a higher being, in the name of God. Please join me in expressing our heartfelt repentance for harms done, along with our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. And if you live in some other part of the United States or even in another country around the world, I invite you to find out who first lived on the land that you are living on and whose back-breaking labor helped to make it into the home that you understand and know today. And let us all commit to working alongside of all of our neighbors to protect Mother Earth, and in doing so, to honor one another. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful and appropriate. I appreciate the way that that introduces the rest of what's unfolding this evening. We do have a bit of a format that I'll share with you. We will have 3 primary speakers coming up, and as part of this event tonight, we know that many here are present and are motivated to do things, to contemplate and to think and reflect, but also to do things. So we recognize that what we're discussing tonight in all of this involves some strategy. And so that's part of what we'll be examining tonight as we go through, as well as the heart desire that's present among us. I want to introduce each of the 3 speakers in turn who when I mention your name, you can give a wave. We'll go ahead and do the introductions at the beginning, and then each of the speakers will have an opportunity to share their time, and then possibly have a question or two. We'll see how the timing goes, and then it'll be just a quick transition to the next speaker. So if the current speaker can just make it clear when they're about done, then we'll take the questions and then we'll transition to the next speaker. But I do want to read the biographies of each of the three presenters tonight, because I think it's helpful for us to know, for some of them that do not know these speakers, to know at least a bit of their background, and they may share more. But I think that will help us frame what we're about to hear and experience tonight. I want to introduce first Reverend Dr. Andrea Acevedo. Hello, thank you. Reverend Acevedo has been a minister for 36 years and has been serving the Center for Spiritual Living in Bellingham for the last 10 years. A wife, mother, and grandmother, Reverend Andrea has an abiding and active interest in reaching for solutions to the climate crisis. Currently, her spiritual community has activated an Earth Stewardship program, and the center recently became a member of Earth Ministries. Emily Larson-Kubiak is with us. She is the Energy Efficiency and Renewables Program Manager at Sustainable Connections. Many of you are familiar with Sustainable Connections, a nonprofit that connects and supports local businesses to create thriving communities. Emily has over a decade of experience in both the residential and commercial building energy sectors, and that's significant, both sectors, and is committed to making energy efficiency affordable and accessible through innovative programs and partnerships. Emily's favorite part of her job is performing energy audits at local businesses and working with the owners to help them make upgrades. Emily is proud to play a role in making Western Washington a leader in energy efficiency as a consultant, collaborator, and advocate local climate action initiatives in her hometown of Bellingham. And then we have Mark Schofield. Hello, Mark. Mark serves as manager of the Community Energy Challenge, a community energy efficiency program at the Opportunity Council in Bellingham. Mark has 20 years of experience as an educator and organizer in the nonprofit sector, most recently providing in-home assessments and education for low-income families with a focus on improving indoor air quality and enhancing home energy performance. So now that I've introduced the speakers, we'll have them take their turns and share. And I think if you're like me, you'll be eager to hear what the connections and interconnections will be among what is shared tonight. So Reverend Acevedo, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and I'm glad you're here. I think I've been invited to speak because my center has been very active in working towards solutions, both individually, but also as a faith organization. So I could tell you all kinds of things, but tonight I want to really talk about some of the things that motivated me to become involved. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to see if we can have an opportunity to see, first of all, Joanna Macy's work. Joanna Macy, I'm sure many of you know, is a very famous activist, and she has created a program called The Work That Reconnects. And when people enter into the program, they're invited into these 4 phases that you see on the screen. And for me, these 4 phases are incredibly important for our work as climate activists. So she starts with the root of the matter, which Reverend Berta also indicated, which is gratitude, giving thanks. Giving thanks is critical to our ability to remain centered in the face of a very difficult situation. And so for me, one of the most interesting things that we can do is to begin to really pay attention to what we're grateful for with Mother Earth, with all that is going on, so that we can ground into that gratitude in our hearts while doing the work. The second phase is honoring our pain. And for those of you who came to one of the very first public gatherings that the Multi-Faith Climate Justice Group put together at the Laremont Manor, you know that when it was my turn to speak, I spoke about grief. And it was important to me to speak about grief and continue to speak about grief, because for me, when we love and value something, which shows up as we are grateful, when that love and value is threatened, we immediately feel grief. And so grief is something that all of us probably in this Zoom room are dealing with when it comes to climate change and all that that implies. Just hearing Reverend Berta talk about what she saw on her way back from Finland is enough to ignite grief in our hearts. And knowing that grief can do several things. So I wanted to bring you one of the grief pieces. Some of you have seen this before, that motivated me into action. And this is by a slam poet from the Marshall Islands.
Dear Matafele Benum, you are a 7-month-old sunrise of gummy smiles. You are bald as an egg and bald as the Buddha. Your thighs that are thunder, shrieks that are lightning, so excited for bananas, hugs, and our morning walks along the lagoon. Dear Matafele Benum, I want to tell you about that lagoon, that lucid, sleepy lagoon lounging against the sunrise. Men say that one day, that lagoon will devour you. They say it will gnaw at the shoreline, chew at the roots of your breadfruit trees, gulp down rows of your seawalls, and crunch through your island's shattered bones. They say you, your daughter, and your granddaughter too, will wander rootless, with only a passport to call home. Dear Matafele Benum, don't cry. Mommy promises you, no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas, no backwater bullying of businesses with broken morals, no blindfolded bureaucracies gonna push this mother ocean over the edge. No one's drowning, baby. No one's moving. No one's losing their homeland. No one's gonna become a climate change refugee. Or should I say, no one else. To the Carteret Islanders of Papua New Guinea and to the Taro Islanders of Fiji, I take this moment to apologize to you. We are drawing the line here. Because baby, we are going to fight. Your mommy, daddy, boo-boo, Jimma, your country, and your president too, we will all fight. And even though there are those hidden behind platinum titles who like to pretend that we don't exist, that the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Maldives, and Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and floods of Pakistan, Algeria, and Colombia, and hurricanes, tidal waves, and earthquakes didn't exist, still, there are those who see us. Hands reaching out, fists raising up, banners unfurling, megaphones booming, and we are canoes blocking coal ships. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the rich, clean soil of the farmer's past. We are petitions blooming from teenage fingertips. We are families biking, recycling, reusing, engineers dreaming, designing, building, artists painting, dancing, writing. We are spreading the word. And there are thousands out on the street, marching with signs, hand in hand, chanting for change now. They're marching for you, baby. They're marching for us. Because we deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive. Dear Matafele Benum, you are eyes heavy with drowsy weight. So just close those eyes, baby, and sleep in peace. Because we won't let you down. You'll see.
So the challenge with grief is that it sometimes can serve to immobilize us. And that happened to me. until I went to the 2018 Parliament of World Religions, where one of the main focuses of that parliament of thousands and thousands of people was climate change. And my heart broke. And it took me months to deal with the grief. So if you're feeling grief, you're not alone. But the problem with grief, when we allow it to freeze us, is that it can take us out of the game at a pivotal moment when being in the game makes all the difference in the world. While I was at the Parliament, I'm not even sure how to say it. I was amazed, I was astonished, and I was heartened by the many presenters, including the slam poet you just heard, and what they had to say, which wasn't all positive. And so I've brought you one other voice from the Parliament that was important to me in my journey, woke me out of my frozen state, and propelled me into action. This one's a little longer, but I think you'll enjoy it. Let's see. This is from the 2018 Parliament of World Religions in Toronto.
First witness, this is a man who looks like his uncle. Uncle? What?
There he is.
Another microphone here? How about these microphones there? Uncle, could you use those? Or you could use these, or...
Ho ho. My name is Angangak, and it means the man who looks like his uncle. I am from the top of the world in Greenland, and I've been speaking about climate change since 1978, and it has become late now. It's fascinating to watch the world. The big ice on my land is really, really big, and she was thick, about 5 kilometers on the average, when I was born 71 years ago. The big ice in Antarctica is much bigger, but it's also melting very fast. It's so interesting to travel the world, to realize the ice in the heart of man has grown so much that we stop recognizing each other. I was in the Vatican a few months ago. There was not one person who stopped me and asked me, "Oh, what's your name? Where do you come from? Would you like some coffee?" Nobody. I just came from Austria. Nobody asked me who I am. I was in Hong Kong. Nobody asked. I was in Rio de Janeiro. Nobody asked. I was in New York City. Nobody asked. It made me realize that I really don't exist, because you never saw me. You never greeted me. And I watched you in a train station in Munich when none of you greeted each other. That's how we measure the thickness of the ice of a human. The old people say, unless You melt the ice in the heart of man. Man will not have a chance to change and begin using his knowledge wisely. We have come over the threshold of climate change. That happened some time ago. But most people are still working in hope that they can stop it. My old people, my great aunt, 91 years old, told me to tell you it is too late. Now we really need to work on melting the ice in the heart of man, so mankind can be given a chance to change and begin using his vast knowledge wisely. Would you personally be part of this mankind whose ice in the heart is melting, so as to you can learn to become the hope for the mankind on earth and begin using your knowledge wisely?
After this, he did a prayer that we would awaken and that the ice around our hearts would melt. And when I first heard him, it was good. It was amazing. It was powerful. But as I've begun to do this work, I realized how true his sharing was. That when sacred humans are faced with the magnitude of the catastrophe before us, we become overwhelmed. Joanna Macy says, of all the dangers we face, from climate chaos to nuclear war, none is so great as the deadening of our response. And so we do indeed need to melt the ice that this catastrophe has sometimes built up around our hearts. We need each other. We need to join together to be able to move and shift and hope. And for me, connection is critical. And so is hope. Hope matters as we move forward. One of the things that gives me hope is that half of the world's population is under 30 years old. Half. And they are connected. They are connected through digital devices, personal devices. They are connected in Zoom rooms. They are connected worldwide. And they expect that connection can lead to change. And they're right. They're right. And so part of what I want to convey tonight is how important it is for us to join together in organizations like the Multi-Faith Climate Justice Group, Earth Ministries, City of Bellingham's All In for Climate Change, Sustainable Connections, in any way and every way we can think of, collectively, because there's power, greater power when we're joined together. You remember the famous words of Jesus when he said, "When two or more are gathered in my name, there will I be also." And I believe that that's true as we face this vast challenge, is that when we join together, we are infinitely more powerful than working alone and solo, and infinitely more able to help each other remain hopeful, energized, and in the game. Part of what inspires me is really staying current on what is actually happening. And so if you have not found this book, Hope Matters, I encourage you to think about purchasing that book and reading it. some of the things in that book have given me great hope. For example, one of the author's premises is that for many of us, we walk around with very antiquated information. And so perhaps you didn't know that giant pandas that were on the brink of extinction are off the endangered species list. Perhaps you didn't know that bald eagles, who were also facing extinction, are now more numerous than they have ever been in recorded history. And my question is always when I read things like that, and what else don't I know? What is happening worldwide? What actions are people taking, and how can I support them? So here in our beautiful city of Bellingham, there are organizations like Sustainable Connections and Opportunity Council that are part of the solution that you and I can be involved in certain ways. And my group of Earth Stewards, who formed themselves after the Parliament of World Religions in 2018, invited Sustainable Connections and Emily Kubiak to do an energy audit of our beautiful church, our center. And Emily came and walked the grounds and walked the buildings that are part of our campus and gave us a huge list of things that we could do that would dramatically reduce our carbon footprint and make our center much more earth-friendly. And I'm pleased to tell you that we implemented many of the things that were in that energy audit. We took advantage, for example, of the free light bulb exchange that was offered to us so that 2 young men came out and exchanged every light bulb from fluorescence and incandescence to LED light bulbs for free. That was part of the program. And then step by step, we took action. So here's some of the things that we did. We were blessed in 2020 to have more donations than we actually had ever received to our center, even in a shutdown state where we were only offering services through live stream. And because of those donations, we were able to implement many of Emily's recommendations. So this is what we did. It was recommended that we replace our natural gas furnace with a ducted heat pump, utilizing the existing duct system that we had to heat and cool the sanctuary, which during the heat dome of this last summer became a sanctuary for the elderly in our community and their friends. We also were invited to consider implementing ozonation generators, there we go, that would be installed in the ducts and would provide a great deal of relief from the pandemic by killing viruses, bacteria, and molds. So we did that. We also replaced the heat pump here in the office where I'm standing with a much more efficient version. And we replaced the old natural gas furnace with an updated gas furnace that would work well with the ducted heat pump that we installed. And so those were just some of the things that we implemented. Did they cost money? Yes, they did. They cost money, but I'm pleased to tell you that all of these changes that we implemented reduced our carbon footprint by more than 11,000 pounds of CO2, which equates to about 37% of the Center for Spiritual Living Bellingham's carbon footprint. Faith communities in our area can also do the same, and some have already begun to implement these changes that will make their churches and their spiritual communities more earth-friendly and reduce the carbon footprint that we all have. And there's so much more still to be done. For me, not only is it important for faith leaders to stand for the moral imperatives that we're facing with climate, but also to encourage individuals to take action for themselves. I have many young people who have told me that my individual actions which include things like eliminating plastics. So I now make my own bread, my own mayonnaise, my own yogurt. I just purchased an electric bike to work instead of driving my gas hog car. But many people will tell me that it's really not our responsibility to take action. It's the corporations that should be taking responsibility for the actions that they've been doing for decades. And one individual's personal choices don't really matter in the long run. But they do to me. They do to me. And I'm very vocal and active on social media about the changes that I'm making. Because part of what we have to do is awaken people out of the frozen state that they may have found themselves in. And begin, as Joanna Macy says, let me show you that graphic again. To see with new eyes what we can do to make a difference. Collectively, yes, very powerful, but also individually. And that's what we need, is people taking action, going forth out of their frozen state and into a state of connection and collaboration so that we can join hands and move together for our children and our children's children and our children's children's children. That's what motivates me, is when I see the face of the children, my grandchildren, and yours. When I watch my children seeking to raise their children in a world that is rapidly changing. Yes, it matters to me. And I'll bake bread till the day I die. It's not as good as the stuff you buy in the store, but it's good enough. And it eliminates bag after bag after bag. What can you do? So if you have any questions for me, now would be the time to type them into the chat. Brian, do we have any questions so far?
I haven't seen any come through yet, but I wanted to thank you for sharing your story and Center for Spiritual Living, a bit of their story and how this all relates. You touched on a number of themes. One question that I was wondering about is, how did some of what you and the Center for Spiritual Living took part in that process, how did that how did it have connections? How did you see connections happening through that?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, what's been wonderful for our community is that actually there are so many people that are motivated to try to make changes that the Earth Stewardship team had to form another team to handle all the people that wanted to help. We didn't have quite enough set up yet so that everybody would have something to do. So the team has organized vegan potlucks to talk about the role that we have in eliminating meat and how that will help the environment. We've organized speakers. In fact, Dave Ketter came and spoke. Reverend Virta's son came and spoke about solar. And so we're seeing that there are so many hearts and minds that would love to find a way to get involved and to actually do something. And so we're planning to take everybody up on that as we develop programs. COVID sort of put a little dent in our activities, but I'm trusting that as we move forward, we'll find ways and means so that anyone and everybody who would like to be connected can.
Thank you. Yeah, among many other things, COVID has offered plenty of opportunity for re-strategizing. There was a question from the gallery about what constitutes the work of CSL's Earth Stewardship Committee. If you could describe that a little bit.
Yeah, I can. So the committee came together and identified the top areas that we felt were most important for educating our congregation about climate change and what can be done, and broke it down into several different categories. So we realized that some of it was education that needed to come from experts in the community outside of our congregation. And we began to invite people to come and speak about what they knew and what they're doing to alleviate climate change. So that was one area. The other area was how we could incorporate education by having TED Talks and potlucks that got people together to listen to experts in that way, and then have roundtable discussions while they were having lunch. So until COVID hit, we were having a regular series where we invited people to come, listen to a TED Talk, and then talk together. We've realized recently that we can implement that via Zoom. So we had to kind of figure out how to do that sort of thing. And so we've actually hosted one event where people were invited to bring their lunch. We showed a TED Talk through the Zoom platform and then had the opportunity for breakout groups. So another way that we've done great work helping people to understand what they can do. We also have made it available for people through our website to calculate their own carbon footprint through many of the different calculators that are available on the web. And we speak about it on a regular basis so that people know that this is a focus for us, that this is really important. So those are some of the things that the Earth Steward team has been actively promoting.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I think we can get one more quick question out. The question is quick. Hopefully we'll be able to keep the answer short too for now. But what are your considerations for solar energy?
We have had some assessment done, and we're inviting a couple of other companies to come and assess. We have this beautiful campus that has lots and lots of trees, which are wonderful to sequester carbon, but not so great for solar. So we're trying to figure out a way where we can invite that technology in and have it actually maximized and work without cutting down trees. Sort of a dilemma. I forgot to mention that one of the other programs that our center early on got involved with was PSC's wind farms, and supporting the wind farms by having the center's electrical bill fund the wind farms as part of our way of generating different forms of electricity.
Great. Thank you so much for those considerations, and again for sharing some of that story. And for a different element of the story or a different perspective, we'd like to now have Emily Larson-Kubiak with Sustainable Connections. So Emily, please share from your perspective.
Yeah, hi everyone. I just really appreciated that so much because as you'll see from my presentation, it feels really good to have a job where I get to work on the solution side of things, but we can also get really up in our head about kind of the concrete aspects. And it's just really nice to take a minute to think about why we do this work in the first place. Having said that, I'm about to talk a little bit about the projects that were done at the Center for Spiritual Living. And I'm guessing all of you are either part of various faith communities in our local area, or live in houses, or interact with the built environment in some meaningful way. So myself and Mark are going to talk about some really impactful, concrete ways that you can lower your footprint as far as your relationship to the built environment. I have a presentation, share screen. Oh, you know, when you have like a million tabs open and suddenly you need to share a specific one, and it should just come up. I'm just going to share my whole screen. You can see my to-do list. It's extensive. This should do the trick. Give me a thumbs up, Brian. As the moderator. We're good? Okay. So yeah, you could hear my intro a little bit about me and Sustainable Connections. I've been working at that nonprofit for 11 years actually, so it's been quite some time, and we're involved with many different initiatives around sustainability in the business community and the local economy. But I'm really proud to work with the Community Energy Challenge program, which was founded sometime around 2009. And I couldn't really help but slip this picture in, but I was actually married at the Center for Spiritual Living. So it was really fun to be invited to do the energy audit there. We were married out under those big trees that shelter from the sun, but I thought it's fun to put in a picture inside the building back in 2013, and proud to say it's still going okay. So the Community Energy Challenge, in a nutshell, there's these knowledgeable, friendly people who are there to walk you through figuring out the most impactful way to make improvements to your building with an eye toward reducing energy use, costs, carbon impacts, and just to basically help, you know, our interface with the built environment live lighter on the natural environment. So how does it work, you may ask? You get in touch with us, you're interested in this process. You might already know what you want to get done. I was working with Mike Roberts at the Center for Spiritual Living, and really knowledgeable, engaged individual. And he really was coming from the point of view that he knew what needed to happen. So in that case, we were there more to just bring everything together, bring in our resources and connections. But we also get people who contact us who just say, I don't know where to start. I, you know, need a knowledgeable person who's going to steer me right with, you know, who's on board with my agenda. And so that's the role we can play for people. So we come out, we look through the whole building, identify all the most meaningful opportunities as we see it to reduce energy use, reduce carbon impacts. And then what we'll do is we'll put it all together in a report to really communicate our findings, do some education about the issues, resources to help with implementation, both financial and logistical. We can help people in, you know, if you don't already have existing relationships with a contractor, that can be one of the most opaque parts of the process. We have so many wonderful contractors who work in these areas in our community, but just helping people understand when they get that bid, what does this mean? What is it really offering? Does it actually meet my energy goals on top of meeting keeping my building warm goals or keeping my indoor air quality good goals? We also, a lot of time, people's favorite part is can help them find different ways to afford the projects. We're a pretty good place to go as far as knowledge about existing incentive programs and grant programs, depending on your individual situation. And we're lucky that we are able to actually provide some grant funding toward these projects through our program as well, that are only available to participants. And then once you've you know, implemented what you want, you're basically in the program for life. So often people don't do their whole checklist at once. We'll get back in touch in a few years, ask questions as they go, and we're really just there to be a resource on an ongoing basis. Common recommendations. I'm not going to just read this list to you, but just to summarize, like Reverend Acevedo mentioned, we have up to $1,000 per business that we work with to provide free direct install items. LEDs is the most common, where there's the opportunity where we can just plug in a replacement that's going to save you, you know, 50, 60, 70% on that lighting fixture. We also work with City of Bellingham on some water saving fixtures. It's really common for people to look at space heating and space cooling. You know, as we all know, that's a huge contribution to energy use. We also will talk about behavioral changes, just the way that people interface with the building can have a huge effect, as we all know. And one part I really love about my job is we will really work with any industry. So often I am finding myself having to just learn about a whole entire new type of business or building to be able to give, you know, an informed opinion about the opportunities. And then of course, renewables, really important part of the current energy transition, and a huge opportunity in local businesses there. So these are all pictures from the energy audit at Center for Spiritual Living. We'll basically go look at any part of the building, any equipment that is salient to energy use. Taking photos to document is very helpful because it's often hard to really remember, even with good note taking, what really happened and what you observed. So, some of this is just checking out the condition of the insulation. Pleased to see that the duct is so well wrapped. Looks like, some more recent work documenting the older ductless heat pump that was at the office building, just checking out the natural gas water heater that's had there, getting some establishing shots of the sanctuary. I believe the day I was there, all these ladders, they actually were already changing out the lighting fixtures for LEDs. So again, this is one of those situations where I'm coming in and there's already all this great motivation and will to make these changes. I'm just helping bring in these financial and knowledge resources. But we also can really help people from scratch who just don't know where to start. So again, this breaks all the rules of PowerPoint. There's way too many words on this slide. That's not the point. I wanted to just show you a little bit about how we make our recommendations. So one interesting thing here, as Reverend Acevedo mentioned, they ended up installing a ducted heat pump. So my initial recommendation, love ductless heat pumps for a variety of reasons. I popped it in there. And then we had a great conversation. Mike was asking great questions after he got a bid from the contractor, just going back and forth and figuring out the right thing for the site. So that's something we can really help with is keeping an open mind about the best way to meet the needs, and ended up going with the ducted option. Though all these savings estimates that I included should be pretty relevant in either case. So we're able to look at that a bit. The most important thing I wanted to call out on this slide, I made a little call out bubble, electrification. I know it's kind of a buzzword right now, but for a very good reason. You'd think, but not always. When we're creating these reports, people aren't necessarily asking specifically about carbon footprint. They're more looking at kind of overall energy, thinking in terms of the energy bill, kilowatt hours and dollars and things. But I was specifically asked to call this out. And a really cool thing in our state is that the legislator created this act that says basically that all of the utilities need to make their electric grid completely carbon neutral by 2045. And I believe in here I have 2030, which is this first date where they're going to make it 80% decarbonized. So there's still a little bit left. But the really interesting thing there is when you switch off of natural gas equipment to electric equipment, especially high efficiency electric equipment, you actually are in a situation, I have it here, here's the pounds of CO2 that you'll save in 2020 if you do this project then, which is what happened. And that will be 24.7% of your current footprint if you're able to get rid of your natural gas use for heating. But I have it called out that if you are able to, oh my gosh, this little window is covering it, so I can't see my stats. Oh, there we go. Yeah, if you're able to complete this project in 2030, you'll actually be saving 35% of your current 2020 carbon footprint because electricity is going to become a cleaner in terms of greenhouse gas and climate impacts, going to become cleaner over time. So we're really trying to help people also electrify end uses as they're thinking about efficiency, and just launched a really cool program with City of Bellingham that Mark will talk about. We're focused on residential in that area. Hope to be doing a lot deeper work in the coming year and years too. I'm just going to breeze past this. It's way more interesting to hear about the people in the building talk about the projects that happen than hear it from my point of view. But I was just, really happy and impressed with the depth that the Center for Spiritual Living went to approach this comprehensive energy efficiency upgrade. Over the years, I've been lucky to work with many, many faith communities in this way. And I think, as you all know, it's really comes from sort of this ethic that drives these communities to want to make these changes. So just sharing a few lessons I've learned, if you're thinking about going through this process. One thing that's been really interesting is hours and occupancy can be so variable. I've been in tiny chapels that their only operating hours are Sunday and a little bit of choir practice, and other 50,000 square foot buildings where there's a school, there's AA meetings, there's an emergency weather shelter, there's services, there's multiple services. So it can be just a huge range. And, you know, part of our job is to kind of understand what that means. One of the issues that Center for Spiritual Living involved kind of that fluctuation of occupancy. So there was some really creative thinking around wanting to change to efficient heat pump technology, which works best if you leave it on all the time. So trying to creatively think, that's why they ended up keeping the a more efficient natural gas furnace to be able to preheat the room, and then that heat pump's able to really do its thing. So kind of this creative thinking around the specific needs of the occupancy type. It's also often multiple uses, sometimes residential buildings, a parsonage on the campus, which just, again, impacts the sort of resources that we're going to bring to that site. Demand charges are a certain type of charge on an electrical bill that only goes to certain sizes of buildings that use a certain amount of electricity, and that really impacts the math of figuring out what both the monetary and energy savings are. So that's something that we have to be aware of. And then, as many of you know, you're probably involved in these processes in your own communities, but there can be really complex communal budgeting and decision-making processes. And again, it's really our job to know how to appropriately interface with that and provide what's needed to help with the decision-making. Finally, I wanted to talk about a few resources. I'll put, you'll see my website up on the screen in about a minute and a half, but I'll also put it in the chat and a few other resources for getting in touch. Really, at the bottom line, I just encourage anyone who, again, I'm the person that talked about commercial buildings, but we're going to hear about homes right after this. I just encourage anyone who's curious to get in touch, and then, you know, we'll figure out your own unique path with what we can do to help you. As I mentioned, there's incentives for participants of our program. Luckily, we're nonprofits, so we're grant funded through several different sources. And through that, we're able to provide up to $5,000 per business for energy efficiency upgrades. And the ultimate amount depends on the amount of energy that we model that will save. And there's kind of a dollar amount per energy unit there. There is a small fee to participate. It's very nominal. It's based on the square footage of the building. We subsidize it with our funding over what you look at on the open market, but we also further discount that 30% for nonprofits, and that pretty much across the board applies to churches and faith communities as well. So some savings there. I just want to call out a program we're currently running called Energize Whatcom. It's aimed at helping rural businesses in Whatcom County access REAP grants from the USDA. These are grants that can pay up to 25% of energy efficiency and renewables projects. So if you're within city limits of City of Bellingham or Ferndale, those unfortunately are the areas of the county that don't count as rural, but anywhere else, and there's many churches in Whatcom County outside of those areas, could potentially be eligible for these grants, and we can help do the paperwork for them, which is probably the nicest thing that we offer because it's onerous, but it's really, you know, worth it, big reward, and help with the energy audit as part of that process. There's, oh, do you hear my toddler squeaking? He's just shrieking in the other room. He's great. He's with his dad. Utility incentives. Everyone's probably pretty aware that there's also rebates and incentives for local utilities, and we're very well versed with helping people access those, and also potentially, again, financing, helping with paperwork and background for those sorts of loan programs. That's it. I know that's a lot of information, but I hope I give people something to think about or something you could use or a thread you could follow. Here's my information, and I'll put that in the chat, but I really welcome anyone who wants to get in touch or ask questions if you have time.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I will just interject at this point to reinforce that this is such a great resource right here in this community in Whatcom County that not every place has. So part of what we're about tonight is awareness, and because we have awareness of this being here, that's really going to help promote what we can do as people here in Whatcom County. And I'll just say that, just to again underline this, that it starts with signing up for an energy assessment with the Community Energy Challenge. So thank you, Emily, for providing that that information. There are several questions coming in. Just the one that I'll throw out there right now before we get to Mark, as we want him to be able to share as well. Is if a person does get their energy assessment, Emily, and then a few years down the road, is it appropriate for another energy assessment to happen, or is that more of the ongoing follow-up, lifetime follow-up that you talked about?
No, absolutely. This comes up a lot. Sometimes it's the same people. Sometimes it's someone who doesn't even know we've been in that building before. We just talk it through. Sometimes all they really need is help going forward with a specific project. But if there's a situation where there's been a lot of changes or new people or new things, then we'll just sign them up to do the process again and get new information. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. All right, and with that, we'll shift over to Mark and give you some time to share about your perspective from Community Energy Challenge as well. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Emily, and thank you, Reverend Acevedo, for the good work. That it's just so encouraging to hear the work that's happening in our community and with faith communities. And you know, I want to give a shout out to my own church, First Congregational Church of Bellingham, for its past participation with the Community Energy Challenge and its ongoing greening efforts. So, and to everybody attending this event, you might now be thinking of ways to improve your own houses of worship or businesses. And I invite you to also consider taking action at your homes, specifically improving energy efficiency in your homes. So why energy efficiency when we're talking about climate change? For starters, in the state of Washington, buildings are the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. And for many of us individually, our homes are probably our largest source of climate pollution. And emissions from the building sector have grown 50% since 1990, far outpacing all the other emission sources. So tackling buildings is critically important to addressing climate change. On the left is a grid of, it shows PSE's fuel mix for electricity production. And you might note that about 2/3 of that fuel mix is fossil fuels, coal and natural gas currently. And so whether your home is heated primarily by electricity or by natural gas, it's likely having a significant impact or contribution to climate pollution. So if we're going to meet the big goals, climate goals that science demands, it's going to require a multifaceted approach. And what we often think of first is rapid expansion of renewable energy sources like solar and wind. Electrification of appliances is also a critical component, especially as Emily mentioned, our state's electricity grid will be getting progressively cleaner. And finally here, energy efficiency retrofits in buildings, which may not be the most glamorous approach to address or meeting our climate goals, but it's critically important and can have an outsized impact. So a couple years ago, the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy issued a report showing that energy efficiency alone can cut US energy use and greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2050. So really getting us halfway there to decarbonizing our economy. And already energy efficiency makes a huge impact. Greenhouse gas emissions in 2017 would have been 12% higher were it not for energy efficiency improvements made since 2020. And so that's really where Community Energy Challenge comes in. As Emily introduced, we're a nonprofit partnership between Opportunity Council and Sustainable Connections. And since 2010, CEC has helped thousands of homeowners and businesses save energy in their homes and commercial buildings. And we do this by providing information, expert guidance, and incentives to make these types of energy efficiency upgrades achievable for more people. On the residential side, when we talk about energy efficiency retrofits, we're really focusing in on what we call the building envelope of a home. So that's the pressure or air boundary and the thermal boundary that wraps your entire house and separates your conditioned living space from the outside. And for most homes, especially older homes, there are multiple holes and cracks and penetrations through that building envelope that results in a lot of air leakage in the home. So typically what we're focusing on first in most of our projects is air sealing and tightening up that home so we're reducing the amount of air leakage. We also focus on insulation and having robust insulation in attics and walls and floors. We look at heating systems and opportunities for efficiency upgrades there. And finally, ventilation upgrades, making sure that as we're tightening up the home, we're not introducing new problems like moisture buildup and condensation. So that's kind of the bread and butter of what we do in our residential CEC programs. And the benefits are generally pretty impressive. So the average annual cost savings for a CEC project is around $563. And the annual average energy savings is 7,391 kilowatt hours, or the equivalent, because we're saving, in some cases, gas therms, but we convert it to kilowatt hours. So just for perspective, that equates to the greenhouse gas emissions from an average passenger vehicle driven over 13,000 miles. So these energy savings are nothing to sneeze at. So an overview of the CEC process. I just want to share a little bit so you understand what would be involved if you decided to go through this program for your home. As with the commercial CEC side of things, all of our projects start with a home energy audit. We focus on doing these for pre-1990 homes because those are the homes that have the greatest potential for energy savings. We also provide a subsidized rate audit fee. So $195 is our standard audit fee, or $95 for households that meet our moderate income guidelines. The audit itself involves a very comprehensive look at the home, getting into all the spaces, including the attic and crawl space, and utilizing a number of diagnostic tools that help paint a picture of what's actually going on with the home in terms of energy use. That includes a blower door test to determine the level of air leakage and also find the locations of air leakage. It includes combustion analysis to determine the safety of combustion appliances in the home. And we use infrared cameras to peek into spaces we couldn't see otherwise to see what insulation levels might be like in a wall, and also to uncover areas where air leakage might be occurring, those hidden areas we may not otherwise see. So after the audit, the CEC Home Energy Advisor will take all the data they collected and run an energy model. And then from that, we'll develop this very comprehensive energy report that will be shared with the homeowner. And it includes many of the key findings from the audit and also a list of recommended improvements that could be made, and shows the estimated annual energy savings, cost savings, and carbon savings. So you can really look at what's going to be most cost effective in terms of projects. So at that stage, it's really up to the homeowner if they want to proceed with a project. They're under no obligation to do that. But if a homeowner does take on a recommended project, we'll provide ongoing expert consultation, and that might include assistance in finding qualified contractors, reviewing bids, and just answering any questions that might come up during the course of a project. And once that project's done, we have one of our third-party quality assurance inspectors go on site and inspect what was done and make sure the work was done in a way that will achieve the types of energy savings that were projected. And after all of that, we provide financial incentives to help buy down the cost of doing this work, which is, again, in many cases, a significant investment. So in addition to any utility rebates or other incentives, we provide a 20% project cost incentive for standard projects. For rentals, mobile homes, or non-utility fuels, some of these hard to reach markets, we offer a 30% incentive. And then for folks who meet moderate income guidelines, we provide a 45% incentive. The goal here is equity and making sure that people who maybe don't have as much disposable income have access to some of these resources to help improve their home. So it all starts by contacting CEC either through our webpage there or calling this number on your screen. And I'll drop a number of links in the chat just so you know, but that's how you can get in touch with us. I also want to call out a project or a program at Opportunity Council that we've been running now for almost 45 years. It's our weatherization program, which provides no cost home energy improvements for eligible limited income households. And it can play a significant role in reducing the energy burden or the amount proportion of household income that goes toward meeting basic energy needs. So to find out more, there's that phone number, and you can email the coned@opco.org email address. Of course, it's not all about big home energy retrofits. There are plenty of low cost or no cost measures and behavior changes that can make a measurable impact on your home's energy use and reduce your carbon impact. So I'll just run through these very quickly. Space heating, which is usually the biggest energy use in a home, just turning down the thermostat, and especially when you're asleep at night or away, turning that down can make a difference. Water heating, typically the second biggest energy user in a home, and washing clothes in cold water, and I promise you your clothes won't know the difference, just saves money load after load, and reducing time in the shower, for example. Lighting, choosing appropriate LED lighting, turning off the lights when they're not needed. And then appliances, if you're using a clothes dryer, don't over dry clothes, but do clean the lint filter every time, or better yet, try line drying outside. Or if you have a second fridge or freezer in the garage or basement that maybe you don't need, you might consider unplugging that and potentially saving a considerable amount of energy and money. So these are just a few highlights. I'm going to drop a few things in the chat for other resources people can go to for other ideas. And lastly, tonight, I am very pleased to announce the launch of a local Bellingham campaign to assist homeowners in converting their gas water heaters to highly efficient electric heat pump water heaters. And Emily touched really well on, I think, the justification for electrifying our buildings, especially as our grid gets cleaner. And so if you are in Bellingham and you have a gas heater, probably an older gas heater, it might be good to consider this now, especially before it breaks down and you're kind of forced into an emergency replacement. So through this campaign, we are partnering with Sustainable Connections, and with funding support from the City of Bellingham and Washington State University, we're able to provide a $200 incentive for participants. And that's in addition to PSE's $500 utility rebate and a $300 federal tax credit. So this is a really good time, if you considered this or want to learn more, to think about how you can look at this one particular appliance in your house and make that conversion as part of a longer term effort to electrify and lower our carbon impact. So great new website, Sustainable Connections put together. So sustainableconnections.org/pumpitup. And so I'll drop that in the chat too, but encourage people to check that out. And lastly, I don't know if we'll have time for questions or not, but here's my contact info. So if anyone does have questions and wants to share your thoughts, please do contact me. We'd be happy to talk. So thank you, and I'll pass it back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Mark. That was excellent. And yeah, I think with an eye on the time, we will have people that have questions to post those in the chat as well. And any of our speakers can feel free to respond to any of those that show up in there if it shows up in the next few minutes. I've really been impressed tonight how we have made connections between the big picture, connecting to grief and how that connects to our spirituality, and then how that connects to a true integrity at every level. And I think we've gone through many of those levels tonight, from the global to the industrial and commercial to right at home. We want to give an opportunity for us to have a bit of a closing tonight, and that will be through, we've invited Noman Tim Burnett to come and share a little bit, and just a brief introduction for him. He has been a student of Zoketsu Norman Fisher since 1987. He was a resident at San Francisco Zen Center's Green Gulch Farm, and he helped found the Bellingham Zen Practice Group in 1991. He was ordained as a Zen priest by Norman himself in 2000 and received Dharma transmission in 2011. Later installed as a guiding teacher of the Sangha in April 2017. Tim has been involved as a botanist, a carpenter, an elementary school teacher, a writer, and a computer programmer. Also happens to be executive director of Mindfulness Northwest, which is focused on secular mindfulness, presenting that in many local communities and professions. So with that, we invite Tim to share just a few words here at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I just want a few words of appreciation first to the Interfaith Climate Justice Group that our community, so Red Cedar Zen Community is the name of our organization, of our church. So we've been blessed to be involved in that and get to know many of you here. And thank you to the Center for Spiritual Living for all your wonderful, progressive, forward-looking work and sponsoring this event. And thank you also for just the wise words that we began with from, sorry, I'm just sort of having a little moment of brain freeze here, from Reverend Bobby Virta and Reverend Andrea Acevedo. And fantastic to learn so much so quickly about the Community Energy Challenge. I have to admit that despite the fact that I'm always running around teaching people to be in one place in one time and not try to multitask, that I went and looked at the website and signed up for an energy audit while you were telling us about it. I figured if I'm going to get distracted, that's a productive distraction. I was listening. Anyway, I just want to offer just a few moments for us to digest, to settle, to consider what we've heard and what's been turning in all of us, I'm sure, as we face this enormous problem. That on the one hand, there are these very concrete, helpful things we can all do, and we have the privilege to be able to do. And on the other hand, as Andrea was saying, it's so overwhelming. So I want to share a poem from Rashani Ria and then just offer a few minutes of silence, actually. Just a few minutes to sit and breathe and allow whatever we've been feeling or whatever we're on the edge of feeling, a little airtime, a little space. That I guess what I really want to say is the sort of central technology in all of this is not all the machines exactly, but there seem to be what's doing the damage. But actually the central technology is our minds. And the way our minds perceive the world, the way our minds think about things, the way our minds are unable to think about things, that's where the solution has to be, right? So to give a little bit of time here at the end of this incredibly valuable presentation to let our minds catch up and to explore our minds. So I hope that sounds helpful. So here's the poem, and then I'll just suggest a few minutes of silence after that. Poem's called The Unbroken. There is a brokenness out of which comes the unbroken, a shatteredness out of which blooms the unshatterable. There is a sorrow beyond all grief which leads to joy, and a fragility. Out of the depths emerges strength. There is a hollow space, too vast for words, through which we pass with each loss. Out of darkness we are sanctioned into being. There is a cry deeper than all sound, whose serrated edges cuts the heart as we break open to the place inside which is unbreakable and whole while learning to sing. There's a brokenness out of which comes the unbroken, a shatteredness out of which blooms the unshatterable, a sorrow beyond all grief which leads to joy, and a fragility out of whose depths emerges strength. There is a hollow space too vast for words, through which we pass with each loss. Out of darkness we are sanctioned into being. There is a cry deeper than all sound, whose serrated edges cut the heart as we break open to the place inside, which is unbreakable and whole, while learning to sing. So I think the only way forward is through, really, right? To feel our brokenness and the brokenness we've brought to the planet. But somehow through that, right? Through that, we can sing a song of hope. So I'll ring a little bell and just suggest that we sit and breathe and just give space for whatever happens. You know, nothing's supposed to happen or isn't supposed to happen. You might want to close your eyes so you aren't so pulled into the screen like we are, and feel your body and the room in which you sit and the moment in which we all live. Feeling the feeling of this moment, this breath, and allowing whatever's here, to be known, to be felt. Maybe there's fear here, or grief, or loss. Maybe also joy, or hope, or feeling connected. Can we allow it all? Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Tim, for that. I felt quite a grounding and centeredness through that even brief but expansive time of silence. Thank you. We want to extend our full thanks and gratitude to all of you for being here on a Friday night and participating in this. We especially want to thank our speakers for being here. You gave of your time willingly, and a number of people have also put in the chat, but thank you to each of you for what you're doing in the community. Many of you are doing wonderful work, and we're grateful for that. And we also encourage there may be a little bit of time here for some discussion after this little event. So if you are not rushing off, then you may be able to hang out a little bit longer on Zoom and listen to some of this discussion. If you did ask some questions, you posed some questions along the way that we didn't communicate in an audible form, they may well be in the chat with some answers at this point. So please do feel free to scroll back up and down in the chat to see if one of the questions you asked in the chat is now answered, and also other people's questions I think that are also very excellent in the chat. We do have some announcements that we are also going to be posting in the chat. Dave Ketter is just posting something now about the City of Bellingham's building electrification and a couple of the vitally important petitions that are coming up, and also have Diane Sue will be sharing an announcement in the chat about the Multi-Faith Network for Climate Justice's net of interconnection. And so that's been a recent project. So if there are other announcements, you can also feel free to share those in the chat. And I will, Kathy, do you have any other final words here?
Yes, actually, Diane has something to share out loud.
Thank you.
So
thank you for
we
clarifying.
could give Diane the floor. Yes.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah.
Much easier with a vision. I want to just briefly share, and I promise this will be brief, a photo of a project that we recently started through the Multi-Faith Network for Climate Justice, and it's called the Net of Interconnection. And this is the beginning of the project that started again a couple weeks ago, and began with an idea shared by Jillian Froby, who is one of the members of MNCJ and also a spiritual leader at Turtle Haven. She was inspired by the mythic story of Indra's net, and she has previously done this and really thought that this was an opportunity for us to focus on interconnection, just as Reverend Verda and Reverend Acevedo were talking about how this time is showing us so clearly our global interconnection and the need for us to work as a community for interconnection. So Rag Finery was very kind in donating fabric for us to repurpose, and we have torn it into strips And on each of the strips, there is a message related to blessings for the earth, our intentions in terms of our individual work toward climate justice. And all of these are going to be woven together into this net, and this net will be traveling from congregation to congregation and perhaps some other locations in the community. It'll be starting at the Center for Spiritual Living. We're thinking it'll be there in a couple weeks, ready to go. And also invite anyone right now in the chat, if you have a message that you would like to put in, that you would like us to write up and to weave into this net. We are really hoping that these threads of interconnection are going to spark a lot of work within our community working together for climate justice. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. That is excellent. And if you do have other comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. I know one question for Tim was an inscription for that poem that you shared. So if you have an opportunity to type that into the chat, or you can say it out loud. Yeah.
Done in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you for doing that. And we hope that all of you have a great evening.